I transferred my family $13,000 over 11 years. I gave up a promotion. I missed birthdays. I answered 3 in the morning phone calls. I drove through snowstorms. I stayed up all night solving problems that were never mine to begin with. And when they threw a party for 70 people, I wasn't on the guest list. Not because they forgot, because they decided. I found out through a group chat, a cousin's message, 9 words I was never supposed to see. That was the Tuesday everything changed. Not because I screamed, not because I confronted anyone, not because I finally said the thing I'd been swallowing for a decade, because for the first time in 34 years, I went completely silent. I didn't call back. I didn't fix it. I didn't make it easier for everyone else. I booked a flight. I packed one bag. And I disappeared to Portugal for 11 days while my family's phone calls went straight to voicemail. What happened next, to me, to them, to all of us, is what this video is about. My name is Claire, and this is the story of the most important thing I have ever done for myself. Stay with me, because if you have ever been the one everyone leans on, the one who gives and gives and gives while slowly disappearing, this story is not just mine. It's yours too. Before I tell you what happened that Tuesday, you need to understand who I was before it. I was 34 years old, financial analyst, small apartment in Chicago. I kept meticulously clean because order was the one thing in my life I could actually control. I was the oldest of 3 children. My brother Daniel was 31. My sister Priya was 28. And for as long as I can remember, I was the one they called. Not because I was the most talented, not because I had the most free time, but because I never said no. Let me give you some numbers, because this story only makes sense with the math. When Daniel dropped out of grad school at 26 and needed 3 months of rent while he figured things out, I paid it. $4,200. He paid back $800. When Priya's car died the week before her nursing board exams, I put a $3,000 repair on my credit card so she wouldn't have to stress during the most important test of her career. She cried and called me her hero. She never mentioned it again. When my parents decided they wanted to renovate the kitchen in the house that was entirely paid off, they asked me to front the down payment while they sorted out their finances. $6,000. 18 months ago. 0 of it back. And the money is only part of it. There were the Saturday mornings I spent helping my mother prep food for church potlucks instead of going to the gym class I had paid for and never once attended. There were the vacation days I used to drive my dad to specialist appointments 3 hours away because he didn't trust anyone else to advocate for him in medical settings. There was the promotion I turned down in 2021 because it would have required relocating to the Seattle office, and my mother cried for 45 minutes on the phone about what would happen to this family if I left. I was 27 when that call happened. 27. An age when most people I knew were making reckless decisions and moving to cities they couldn't afford and staying out too late with people they'd just met. I was on the phone with my mother, choosing to stay. I stayed. I always stayed. And in staying, I gave something away that I didn't know I'd miss until much later. The particular lightness of being young without a weight attached to it. I had a best friend named Margot who used to say, "Claire, your family treats you like a vending machine. They press a button and expect something to come out, and you let them." I always laughed it off. I'm not laughing now. It was a Tuesday in March. I had just finished a 12-hour shift. There was a presentation the following morning I'd been preparing for 3 weeks. I was tired in that deep way, the kind that sits behind your eyes and makes the edges of everything slightly blurry. My phone buzzed. It was a group message from my cousin Layla. Just 9 words. 9 ordinary words that rearranged everything I thought I knew. She wrote, "So excited for the celebration this weekend. See you all there." I stared at my screen for a moment, waiting for context. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary was that Saturday. As far as I knew, there was no celebration. My mother had mentioned something vague about maybe doing a small dinner someday soon. I had taken her at her word. I typed back to Layla, "What celebration?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Then, Oh, the anniversary party at your Aunt Rima's house? Your mom's been planning it for 2 months, 70-something people. It's going to be beautiful. I put my phone face down on the table. I picked up my tea. It was cold. I set it back down. And then, very quietly, in the stillness of my apartment, I started to understand something I had been refusing to understand for 11 years. I called my mother. She answered bright and distracted, the way she gets when she's busy doing something she enjoys. Mom, Layla just messaged about an anniversary party this Saturday. A pause. Not long, but long enough. Oh, sweetheart. It's just a small thing. We didn't want to bother you. You've been so busy with work. Mom, 70 people. Well, Rima has a big family. Is my name anywhere on the guest list? Another pause. Longer this time. Claire, don't make this into something it isn't. And there it was. The sentence my family had used to close every conversation where I tried to name something real. Don't make this into something it isn't. As though my feelings were always the problem. As though the wound only existed because I was bleeding. I hung up. I sat in my kitchen for 22 minutes. I watched the clock on the microwave change. 6:14, 6:21, 6:36. And in those 22 minutes, I added it all up. Not just the money, but the cost. The true, full cost of being the person my family relied on while simultaneously being the person they considered least. The promotion I didn't take, the trips I didn't go on, the relationship that ended partly because I was always prioritizing someone else's emergency over my own present moment, the 70 people who were invited to celebrate my parents, and the one person who wasn't, their daughter, the one who paid for the kitchen. Here's what the old Claire would have done. She would have called her mother back. She would have said something careful and self-erasing like, "I'm sure you had your reasons. And I understand, I just wanted to check in." She would have offered to help with the party she wasn't invited to. She would have spent the weekend sending a gift and pretending everything was fine. She would have swallowed it. I know that version of myself very well. I felt her trying to take over the moment I opened my laptop. Because the first thing I did, out of pure muscle memory, was open my mother's contact. My thumb hovered over her name. I had a whole speech ready, something conciliatory, something that would make her feel better at my own expense, something that said, "I forgive you for this. Please don't be uncomfortable. I won't make it a thing." 11 years of conditioning. It nearly won. It almost always nearly won. I put the phone down. I sat with my hands in my lap for a long moment, and I asked myself, not for anyone else, just for me, when was the last time I did something that had nothing to do with what this family needed from me? I couldn't answer, not because the question was hard, because I genuinely couldn't find an example, and something shifted in me at that realization, not dramatically, not with a surge of anger or a moment of cinematic clarity, just quietly. The way a door closes that you know will not open again in the same way. I opened my laptop, and I did something I had been saving for someday for 6 years. I booked a solo trip to Portugal, not a budget trip, not the kind where you feel vaguely guilty the whole time for spending money on yourself. The kind with a boutique hotel in the Alfama district and a private wine tasting in the Douro Valley and a cliffside dinner in Sintra. I had bookmarked and closed and bookmarked and closed so many times the tab had its own permanent spot in my browser. 11 days. My hand hovered over the confirm button for exactly 3 seconds. Long enough for the old voice to say, "What about work? What about your savings? What will they think? Is this too much? Are you being dramatic?" 3 seconds. Then I pressed it. The confirmation email arrived instantly. And I sat back and felt something I hadn't felt in so long I almost didn't recognize it. Relief. Pure, uncomplicated relief. Not happiness, not yet, but relief. Like a pressure that had been building for years had finally found somewhere to go. My phone started ringing 20 minutes later. My mother, my father, Daniel, Priya, my Aunt Rima, who I hadn't spoken to in 4 months. I turned my phone face down and opened a new note on my laptop instead. I wrote, I have been funding this family's stability while being excluded from its celebrations. I have been available for every crisis and invisible for every joy. That is not love. That is labor without acknowledgement. And I am done. I saved it. I didn't send it to anyone. I didn't need to. Lisbon smells like salt and old stone and something floral I couldn't name. I arrived on a Thursday evening with one suitcase and a phone I had given the number of to exactly 2 people, my friend Margot and my colleague Jen, who I'd asked to water my office plant. My family did not have the hotel name. I had never, in my adult life, been genuinely unreachable by them. The recognition of that fact hit me somewhere in the taxi from the airport, watching terracotta rooftops slide past the window. I had no idea who I was when no one needed anything from me. I was about to find out. The hotel was a converted 17th century townhouse with 12 rooms and a rooftop terrace that looked out over the river Tagus. The owner, a woman named Beatrice, brought me a glass of wine when I checked in and asked if this was my first time in Portugal. First time doing anything alone, I told her honestly. She smiled like she'd heard that before. Then Lisbon is the right city, she said. It was built for people who need to remember something they forgot about themselves. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't need to. The first 2 days, I didn't do much. I slept without an alarm for the first time I could remember. I ate breakfast slowly, with a book open next to my plate, at a small cafe where the owner remembered my order on the second morning without me saying a word. I walked. Hours of walking, through neighborhoods whose names I couldn't pronounce, and markets where I bought things I didn't need, and past street art that made me stop mid-stride and just look. My phone buzzed periodically, but I had turned off all notifications except Margot's contact. The silence was uncomfortable at first, that particular restlessness of waiting for someone to need something. By the end of day 2, it had shifted into something else entirely. Quiet, actual quiet, in my chest, where the anxiety usually lived. On day 3, I went on a tour of the Douro Valley. There were 9 of us, a retired couple from Australia, 2 young women from Brazil on a gap year, and a man named Sebastião, a local architect, 60-something, with the unhurried manner of someone who had decided long ago not to rush through anything. He had joined the tour alone because, as he explained cheerfully, I've lived here 40 years and never done this. Today seemed like the day. I laughed at that. Then I thought about it. 40 years living somewhere without stopping to actually see it. 40 years assuming there would be time later, when things settled down, when life became less demanding. I was 34. I had been assuming the same thing. Sebastião and I walked together between vineyards that climbed the hillside in terraces. He told me he had spent most of his career building things for other people, hotels, offices, family homes for families that weren't his. I was very good at understanding what other people needed, he said. Not so good at understanding what I needed. He said it without self-pity, just as observation, the way you say a true thing that is already finished hurting. What changed? I asked. He thought about it for a moment. I stopped waiting for permission, he said. I realized no one was going to give it to me, so I stopped asking. We walked in silence after that. Sebastião didn't know a single thing about my family or my 11 years or the party I hadn't been invited to, but he had just described my entire life in 2 sentences. The Australian woman on the tour, Deb, asked me later what I did for work. I told her. She nodded, then asked something no one in my regular life ever asked. And what do you love? I opened my mouth to answer and found nothing there. Not because I had no answer, but because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked, or the last time I had answered for myself rather than in relation to someone else's needs. I don't know, I said. I'm trying to remember. Deb nodded like that was a completely reasonable answer. That's what holidays are for, she said, and poured me another glass. Back in Lisbon, Margot messaged me on day 5. Brace yourself. Your mother called me. Said the party happened and it felt wrong without you. Your dad didn't speak for most of the evening. Daniel gave a toast that everyone said felt hollow. I sat with that, not with satisfaction, but with clarity. The party that excluded me had been diminished by my absence in a way no one had anticipated, because no one had paused long enough to consider what I actually contributed, not just financially, but the way I moved through a room, making sure everyone was comfortable, noticing the cousin in the corner who needed someone to talk to. They hadn't invited me, and they had felt my absence the entire night. On day 7, I rented a bicycle and rode to a viewpoint above the city just before sunrise. The city was gray and gold and completely still, the river like a mirror below. I sat on a stone wall and watched the light change for 40 minutes without looking at my phone once. At some point, I started to cry. Not from sadness, from something more complicated. Grief for the years I had given away, but also something that felt, tentatively, carefully, like the beginning of something else entirely. I was not responsible for fixing their mess. The thought arrived so quietly, and it was the truest thing I had ever thought. On day 8, I turned my full notifications back on. 84 messages, 19 missed calls. I made myself a coffee and read every single one. My father's messages started formal and defensive. Claire, I'm not sure what's gotten into you, but this behavior is concerning. By message 6, they had shifted. I want to talk. I'm not sure what to say, but I want to talk. Daniel's messages were chaotic, ranging from "Why are you doing this to the family?" to a voice note at 2 a.m. where he just said, "I've been thinking about the money, Claire. I know I owe you. I'm sorry I've never said that before." And then silence. And then the sound of him setting his phone down. Priya sent a long message that clearly took multiple drafts. She wrote about how she had always known she took me for granted but hadn't known how to stop, that she had confused my reliability with my inexhaustibility, that she didn't realize those were two different things until I wasn't there. And then, between Priya's message and my mother's, I found one from Layla. Short. Careful. I'm sorry I forwarded that invite without thinking. I genuinely didn't know you didn't know. I hope you're okay. Wherever you are, it sounds like you needed it. I stared at that for a long time. Layla hadn't created the situation. She had accidentally illuminated it. There's a difference. I wrote back, "Thank you for telling the truth without meaning to. I needed that more than you know." She sent a single heart. Sometimes that's enough. My mother's messages I read last. She had written 12 over 8 days. Uneven, inconsistent, some apologetic, some defensive, some just fragments. I was worried. I didn't think you'd mind. I know that's not an explanation. I keep thinking about what Layla said, that you seemed so surprised when you found out, and I realized I hadn't asked myself why. And then the last one, sent at 11:47 at night. Short. No punctuation. Just, "I think we made you invisible because it was easier than seeing how much we were asking." I read that line 4 times. Then I set my phone down and looked out at the river. A family rarely admits its own cruelty clearly. Usually it hides behind good intentions and busyness, and that's just how we are. My mother's message wasn't an absolution, it wasn't a promise, but it was, possibly for the first time, the truth. I flew home on a Sunday. I had booked a dinner with my family for the following Tuesday. Not at my parents' house, where the furniture was arranged to make me feel like a child returning, but at a restaurant I chose, at a time I set, with a reservation in my name. I arrived first. I ordered sparkling water. I waited. They came in together, my parents, Daniel, Priya, the way they always did when they needed collective courage. My mother's eyes went to my face immediately. "You look different," my father said, after they had settled and done the preliminary work of pretending the last 2 weeks hadn't happened. "I am different," I said, and I meant it without drama. I had brought a folder, 3 pages, printed. My family eyed it the way people eye something that tells them this is not going to be comfortable. Good. I opened it and placed the first page in the center of the table, a simple list of financial contributions, dated with amounts. No accusations, just the record. I've contributed financially to this family for over a decade, I said. These are the numbers. I'm not placing them here to shame anyone. I'm placing them here because for 11 years I pretended they didn't exist, and that pretending cost me more than the money did. Daniel looked at the page for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were red. My father said nothing, but I watched him read every line, and I watched something move across his face that I had never seen there before. Not guilt, exactly. Something older and heavier than guilt. Something that looked like recognition. I placed the second page down. A timeline. Dates of events I had been excluded from alongside dates of things I had shown up for. Side by side. The contrast was not subtle. I will not be excluded from this family's celebrations while being included in its crises, I said quietly. If I'm not important enough to invite when things are good, I am not available when things fall apart. That is not punishment. That is just consistency. My mother looked at the timeline and pressed her fingers to her mouth. My father reached forward slowly and straightened the page on the table, the way you handle something you want to treat carefully. He didn't speak. He just straightened it. And somehow that small, wordless gesture said more than any defense or apology could have. He had heard it. I placed the third page down. 5 lines, clean and direct. These are the changes I need going forward. Advance notice for family events, minimum 2 weeks. Repayment of outstanding loans within 6 months on an agreed schedule. No more requests for unpaid work. Requests, not assumptions, for my time. And no silence or guilt when I say no. I folded my hands on top of the folder. If these aren't something you can honor, that's a choice you're making, and I'll respect it by making my own. The table was quiet. We didn't realize, my father said finally. 3 words. Plain, unadorned, and then, quieter, almost to himself, I didn't realize how much you were carrying because you made it look so effortless. I think I let myself believe that meant it wasn't costing you anything. He looked up. That was wrong of me, Claire. I'm sorry. I had waited 11 years to hear my father say those words without a but attached to them. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. He placed an envelope in front of me, a bank transfer confirmation, not the full amount, but a start, with a note in his handwriting. Monthly until it's done. I promise. Priya said, I want to take you to dinner next week. Not to talk about any of this, just to take you to dinner, as your sister, if you'll let me. And my mother, who had been the quietest of all, covered my hand with both of hers and said nothing for a long moment. Then, I want to know you, not the version of you that holds everything together. You. Will you let me try? I looked at her, really looked, past the habits and the years of careful management between us. Yes, I said, but it has to be real, not comfortable. Real. She squeezed my hand. Real, she agreed. That was 8 months ago. I want to tell you that everything healed perfectly, quickly, cleanly. But that's not how it works. Families don't transform in a single conversation. They transform in the 100 small moments that follow. When someone chooses differently than they used to, when the old pattern almost wins and then doesn't. The change that means the most to me isn't the money Daniel has been sending, though he hasn't missed a month. It isn't the dinners with Priya, though we've had 5 of them and everyone feels more like sisters and less like strangers. It's the Sunday calls with my mother. She calls at 10 in the morning, every week, without fail. And the calls are different now. Not efficient, not transactional. She asks about my week, and then she waits, actually waits, with silence, for the real answer, not the polished one. Last month, she told me she had been seeing a counselor. She said it with a slight grimace, the way she says anything that comes from a self-help context. but she said it. To me. On purpose. She said, "She tells me I need to get comfortable with people having needs I can't immediately solve." A long pause. "I think I've been doing that wrong with you for a long time." I didn't rush to reassure her. I sat in the honesty of it with her. "Yes," I said. "But you're doing it differently now. I notice." She exhaled like she had been holding that breath for months. I took the Seattle opportunity, a better one than the version I had turned down at 27. My apartment looks out over the Puget Sound. Some mornings, the light on the water does something I don't have language for yet, and I find myself standing at the window for 10 minutes, nowhere to be, no one waiting. I have a friend here named Soul who moved from Mexico City last year. She takes photographs like I do and makes pasta that requires 3 hours and a lot of mess. We went to a concert last Friday and stayed out until midnight, laughing in the cold on the way home about nothing important. I thought about it walking home. How young I felt. How unremarkably, quietly young, in the way I hadn't been able to be at 27 when I was on the phone with my mother, choosing to stay. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a revelation, it was just ordinary. Just a Friday night with a friend, the way Friday nights are supposed to be. I had waited 16 years for ordinary. It turns out ordinary, when you've been starved of it, feels exactly like everything. I sat with that thought for a while, then I finished my coffee and went to bed. I have my Sundays back, my savings back, my yes back, which means my no finally means something, and I have myself back, which, it turns out, was the thing I was missing all along. If you have been the person in your family who holds everything together while being taken apart, if you have watched your name be the last one added to the list and the first one called when something needs fixing, I want you to hear this. The love you have been giving is real. The sacrifice is real. And you deserve, not someday, not when they're ready, not after they change, you deserve right now, exactly as you are, to be someone's first call when the news is good. You deserve to be invited. And if they don't invite you, go to Portugal. Go anyway. Build the life while you're waiting for them to catch up. And if they never do, it turns out, the life is enough. Before you go, I need to ask you something real. Have you ever been the dependable one? The one everyone calls but nobody truly sees? Drop a single word in the comments that describes how that felt. Just one word. Not a paragraph. Not an explanation. One word that says everything. I will read every single one. I mean that. Now, 3 small things that take 3 seconds each and mean more than you know. First, if this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something you have been carrying quietly for a long time, hit the like button. Not for me, for the algorithm, because that button is the only way this story finds the people who need it most. 1 tap. That's it. Second, think right now of one person in your life who is always the one holding everything together. The one who never asks for help. The one everyone leans on and nobody checks on. Send them this video, don't say anything with it, just send it. Let them watch it alone. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone you love is show them that their exhaustion has a name and that someone else lived it and found the other side. Third, subscribe. Not because I'll ask you every single video, but because the stories I tell here are for the people who have spent too long being invisible in their own lives. If that is you, you belong here. Hit subscribe and come back. You gave them everything. It is not selfish to keep something for yourself. Go live your Portugal. I'll see you in the next one.